you are a food critic, a food journalist. What's the difference?
I think I feel like there's food journalist, there's food writer. I think I wear all three hats. I think for critic, it would be that I'm critiquing work. As a journalist, it would be that I'm reporting on stories, openings, trend pieces, stuff like that I do still for Atlanta Magazine, Eater Atlanta, and the AJC. I'm still doing all of that. And then as a food writer, I also, because I went to culinary school, write recipes because I really love to cook. And especially over the past year, I have cooked so much. So I have a lot of things to write about. And those are the differences, in my opinion.
Was your life ever threatened as a food critic?
Not threatened, but I have had some really interesting phone calls from chefs and restaurateurs. Back when I had like an answering machine, I had to like eventually learn to turn the volume all the way down so my child would not hear the things that chefs had to say. There have been some very fiery chefs, an Italian one in particular, but then we ended up talking and we had a great conversation. So, you know. I understand they're sensitive, it's creation, it's art. I would also be very, sensitive about it. So I get it.
But as a food critic, isn't your job to critique?
Yes, but you have to remember there's people behind it. And that I think when at the beginning of my career, I was super harsh. I was young and brazen. I thought I knew everything. But the more I think, because I really specialized in like immigrant run restaurants, like on Buford Highway, Gwinnett, Tucker, down south, that was like really the thing I enjoyed lifting up the most. Once you got to know that these were these people's livelihoods, you had to balance it. Some editor told me you can always say a good thing for every bad thing. So I do believe you can critique responsibly, and I do think criticism is still very important to chefs. Besha Rodell, John Kessler, they've argued that, just like art, criticism needs to exist for chefs.
Currently, during the pandemic, were you rah-rah for the restaurateurs or chefs, or did you want to go out there and just sort of like state the case of what was happening?
Like, what do you mean?
In terms of as a critic, because what I was watching and observing from Sitsima in Washington D.C., they were cheerleaders. They weren't necessarily going out and being a critic. And even today, I find that they're not being a critic.
I personally, I was really fatigued with criticism before the pandemic started. I was really tired of ripping apart people's creativity. It was just weighing on me a lot more heavily as I aged, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I talk Christiane Lauterbach and I are very close, and she never gets tired of it, of going to restaurants and that she's just so good at it. And I respect her so much about it. And I don't think I have the same stamina. During the pandemic, I tried to do as much as I could to help, whether it was donating my own money, lifting up people's pivots, as they were going and hanging their own shingle. But I wasn't going out to restaurants a lot. The minute that we learned that you couldn't get it from food and from surfaces as easily as people breathing in your face, I started doing takeout immediately. But I wasn't criticizing it. And I don't think I ever want to go back to being a restaurant critic. I have to be honest. I think that I am beyond that part of my life. I've just phased out.
Is there a food-related product you eat that is embarrassing?
Yes, I have many. I grew up in a family where like my parents were like immigrants, so like we never had like tricks at home or any of like the fun sugary stuff. So like, I definitely have my guilty food pleasures, but they're not really guilty because, you know, I balance it. But I love Hostess cupcakes, the chocolate ones with the cream inside. I love an Egg McMuffin for breakfast from McDonald's. And you know, I like high and low. I like high and low cuisine. I like high and low fashion. So there's a place for everything, you know.